Hello there, and welcome to the Meaningful Stitch. This is episode 11, and I am Amy Palco. I'm coming to you from Edinburgh, Scotland, and this is my digital home from home, a place where I get to share with you my knitting practice and my knitting projects. I have lots and lots to share with you. I'm absolutely surrounded in yarn and knitting, so I'm really excited to share all of that with you. There's perhaps a little bit more this time round because it's taken me a little while to record. This year got off to a little bit of a rocky start, and so I feel like I'm only just beginning to hit my stride now. So with that, we've got a new episode, and so I hope you enjoy everything that I'm going to share with you today. But before I get on to the knitting, I wanted to share with you a card that I drew, which is from this deck here, which is, as you might know if you watch this channel often, this is one of my favourites. It's the Sacred Rebel Oracle by Alana Fairchild. And the card that I drew for us for today was this one. Come to life. There we go. You can see it properly there, I think. And I'm just going to read you a few words from the guide. The message of this oracle is be alive. Don't imagine you can go back to sleep. You're too awake for that now. There's no falling back into old ways. So if you do so, it will be short-lived and won't feel the same as it used to. You may grieve this. You will certainly eventually celebrate it. You've crossed the threshold from an old way of being in an old life, and try as you might, you cannot return. It is better to let it go. Grieve if needs be, celebrate if needs be, or do both, and move on into this moment. There is another adventure awaiting you now. You need a deeper connection to your own instincts, body, feelings and intuitions so that you can receive this new calling. You can trust in it too. Embrace it and it will embrace you. So, I thought that was a particularly lovely oracle to begin our episode today with, so come into life, and I'll be sharing a little bit later on about what's calling me into life. But before we get to all of that, there's lots of knitting. So we'll start with what I'm wearing, which is this gorgeous Briochealicious, which is designed by Andrea Mowry, and actually I did not knit this. I spoke last episode about knitted hugs, and I wanted to wear today a hug that had been knitted for me. Well, it was knitted quite a while ago. It wasn't knitted for me, but it was given to me. And it's by my friend Jen, who knitted it. And it's just lovely. It's knitted in drops alpaca, so it's super soft, very cozy. I'll take it off so you can see it properly in all its glory. Here we go. It's got these lovely bands of brioche, and then it's divided with these bands of garter. And it's a crescent shaped shawl, which means that it kind of curls at the ends, which I really love, particularly because I tend to wear my shawls like this, which is I bring the two ends up and round, and then it bunches up round my neck, which makes me feel lovely and cozy and hugged. So my friend Jen gave me this beautiful shawl when we were away on my 40th birthday trip, which we spent in a little cottage on the far northwest coast of Scotland. And that was a couple of years ago now, but I've been thinking about that place a lot because it's also connected to one of my other knits that I'm going to share with you later on. So this is the Briochealicious. And underneath, you might notice that, see, it's matching. So I had actually knitted a jumper which was using the same yarn in the same colour as the one that Jen used in this beautiful shawl. And it's drops alpaca, and I'll stand up so you can see this bit better, so you can see the sleeve detail. And other than that, it's really just a basic raglan. It is Tin Can Knits Flax Light, which is knitted in 4-ply yarn, and it probably doesn't look like you might imagine, because if you've seen the Flax Light before, you'll know that it's got a garter panel that runs down the sleeve. And so what I did was I replaced that garter panel with a lace stitch. So I went through this book lace and eyelets, 250 stitches to knit, and it's edited by Erica Knight. And I found this stitch pattern here, which is the fish scale lace panel. Now it's worked over 17 stitches, and the garter panel, from what I can remember, because this was a while ago, in this sleeve insert was 20 stitches. So I was looking, when I was going through the book, I was looking for a lace stitch pattern that was roughly equivalent so that it would look right, and then I positioned it within the sleeve to make sure that it was that slightly further forward, with it being the 20 stitches, so with being 17 stitches instead of 20. So I moved it slightly further forward so that you could see it more from the front. and that was really the main modification. I've actually knit flax patterns quite a few times, and I don't think I've ever knitted one without modifying it. The Tin Can Knits patterns are really excellent. They're very well written. If you have never knitted a sweater or jumper before, then I think that might be a good place to go. They've got free patterns. This was a free pattern, Flax Light. They've got Flax, which was the original, which was knitted, I think, in Aran weight. And I knitted Flax Aran weight jumpers for my children. So my daughter wanted one with a kangaroo pocket in the front, so that kind of shape. So I knitted that. My son wanted a polo neck, so I knitted one with a polo neck, and my other son wanted one with a hood. So I had to improvise that a bit and modified the flax to have a hood. So I find it's a very easy pattern to modify and to make your own. And so this is my flax, and it includes the lace panel and the sleeves. But it's such an easy way to change up the pattern just by taking out the garter panel and replacing it with something like a little bit of lace. So I wanted to share that with you because one of my works in progress is also a Tin Can Knits pattern that I am modifying. So, but before I go to that, I wanted to share with you what I'd finished. So, what I finished I don't actually have with me because it was another knitted hug. So this time I knitted a pattern by Stephen West called Painting Bricks, and it came out last year, and I really loved the pattern. It's you create the bricks by slip stitches, and so it's very simple, very straightforward, very easy colour work to do, and it's very graphic, it's very geometric, and it has a strong impact. And I knitted one for my friend Jen, who gave me that lovely Briochealicious shawl, and it is knitted in undyed yak merino silk, and for the main colour, and for the contrast colour I've used a black silk mohair from Isager. So I'm going to pop a picture up of that now so that you can see it rather than just me describing it. I mostly stuck to the pattern. The only things that I did was that I slipped the last stitch on every row with my yarn held forward just to create a smooth even edge on my garter border. And what else did I do? Oh yes, I carried the mohair, the black mohair, up one side of the shawl just to try and avoid having to weave in all of those ends. Although that said, Stephen West does have an excellent tutorial on weaving in ends, which you can find on YouTube and which I'll link to in the description box below, which is also where you'll find all of my show notes. But I do actually have a Painting Bricks to show you because I knitted one for myself last year. So I thought I would take this opportunity to show it to you because I don't have the one that I've already gifted. So this is mine. As you can see, it's a large shawl. I don't really do, as you know probably by now, I don't really do small shawls. So this is my Painting Bricks. So as you can see, the bricks are created by these slip stitches. So it's very easy to create quite a distinct and graphic look, which which I really like. This is knitted in Malabrigo Machita in the colour Sandbank, and I think I used 2 skeins for that. And my bricks are Drops Brushed Alpaca. So this is Pink Sand, this is Curry, this is Pale Rust, this is Rust, and this is Bordeaux. So I really enjoy playing with colour work and texture combined. So something like, remember with the pink velvet, you know, we played with the Suri alpaca from Ching Fibre and wove that through into the colour work, brought that through into colour work. So you're not just introducing a new colour, but you're introducing a new texture. And I really enjoy that. And as you can see, I don't know if you can see if I can hold it up close, the difference between the merino, the superwash merino, and the drops brushed alpaca is that there's quite a distinct difference in the weight. So you have this this gauge, I think, which is slightly lighter here than the bricks, which makes it a little bit lighter and a little bit more see-through. And of course we've got the fluff. I love a bit of fluff. So there we go. And I did the same modifications as I mentioned. So you can see that I've got this smooth edge here. I couldn't carry my yarn up the side, however, because I was using lots of different colours. I'm trying to show you where my ends are weaved in, but I've done a pretty good job, so so I don't think I can find them. They're pretty well woven in, but there you can see it's quite a nice edge on it. It's very cozy, it's very light, it makes a big statement, I think. It looks a little bit like a stained glass window, you know, like the rose stained glass that you sometimes see in churches and cathedrals. I really like this pattern, and like I said, it's actually very easy. You get a lot of impact for such an easy and simple, straightforward pattern. So I really like it. And obviously that was the second one I've knitted. You quite often hear people saying that once they finish something that they would knit a second one or make a second one of something, and then I think people rarely do, but I'm possibly the exception to that rule because I'm always knitting a second one. So anyway, that's the painting bricks, and the finished one, as I said, has already been sent off, but this is the one that I knitted for myself last year. I think it was during our first lockdown. We are now in our third lockdown, so there we go. That's what I finished. What I'm working on, I have quite a lot going on actually. I'll share with you the first one, which I'll just grab it here. It's in one of my cocoon tree bags. Again, I will link to the cocoon tree in the description box below. So this is Jones by Tin Can Knits, and like I said, this is modified. This is not being knitted to pattern, which means that I'm altering it actually from a sweater, from a pullover, a jumper. No, sorry, I'm knitting it from a cardigan into a jumper. So it's being knitted in the round, bottom up. Oh dear, bottom up, and it's a combination of this lovely braid cable with these moss stitch panels, and it was supposed to be knitted flat, and I have replaced the button bands with an extra cable insert, which is about another 15 stitches. So I just cast on an extra 15 stitches to my original count, and then I've just been continuing on like that. So I've knitted around about 10 inches. I've got another 9 inches to go before I split for the sleeves. So that all looks relatively straightforward, keeping in mind the modification. My plan is still to do a kind of shawl collar, and yeah, we're going to see how that goes. I am knitting this in, it's more drops, you'll see a theme here, Drops Alaska, and I think this is in the pale olive colour. And this is knitted, like I said, for my son, and he's the one that chose this colour and this yarn. And he wanted an Aran jumper, he wanted cables, he wanted something that would be super cosy because it has been very cold here, although we have now had a big thaw. But he didn't want a regular crew neck, he wanted, or a round neck, he wanted something a bit different, which meant that I couldn't find any pattern that really sort of ticked all the boxes. He found a pattern which was a very highly complex cable pattern, which I just didn't feel as though I had the brain space for at the moment, so I wanted something that was a little bit more simple, a little bit more straightforward. And this is a 4-row cable repeat, oh sorry, it's an 8-row cable repeat with a cable stitch on every 4th row. So it really is a pretty simple, straightforward knit. And as you can see, I have put in stitch markers to make it even easier. So that means that when I am sitting watching the television in the evening, I don't even necessarily have to think about this too much. You can just knit it fairly straightforwardly. The other thing that I need to say too is that I'm not just modifying this from a cardigan into a jumper, but I'm also taking it from DK weight to Aran weight. So I think I shared in the last episode a couple of gauge swatches that I had done as I was trying to figure out what size of needle I needed to use, and also what my gauge was going to be in order to figure out what size to knit. And so I've ended up knitting, I think these are, 4.5s, because I wanted a relatively dense fabric but not too inflexible, and I used a 4 for the ribbing and a 4.5 for the body, and that has given me a gauge, which means that I can knit the extra small and get the large size. So as long as I make sure that I knit the right length of inches, the right number of inches for the body, rather than the specified for the extra small, that's when I switched to the large size for the pattern. And but if there's any stitch counts, then I'm looking at the extra small size. So that's basically how I'm doing that. I think there will be a little bit of an issue around row gauge, but only when I get up to the collar and the raglan. So I may need to make some alterations and judgments as I get to that point, but we'll see. That's all ahead of me. So that's one of the things that I'm working on right now. The second thing that I'm working on is a pair of socks. Now, I am not a big sock knitter, I have to say. I know you've seen me knit one pair of socks, I think, on this podcast before, and those were also for my son, the same son that's getting the cable jumper, and that was for his kilt. So he turned 21 last year, and because it was his 21st birthday, the family all got together and bought him a kilt. And to go along with that, I wanted to make him a pair of kilt hose. So I knitted those socks, and they were DK weight, and they were Kate Davies design, and they were beautiful. They were really lovely. They worked out very well, and it was a relatively straightforward knit again. You know, it was an easy one to do. But other than that, I think that was possibly the only pair of socks that I knitted last year. So I think I'm batting an average of around about one pair of socks a year. So this may be the one pair of socks that I'm knitting. This is them. These are the Shell Cottage socks by Helen Stewart. So I have, as you can see, I've knitted their top down. So I've done the twisted rib cuff. I've knitted the leg, the heel flap, and I have turned for the heel, and I am now onto the foot. But that's not all, because I am knitting these 2 at a time. This is my effort. This is my way of trying to avoid second sock syndrome, which my mum shared with me, and so I'm giving it a go, so we'll see. So again, I've done the cuff, I've done the leg, And on this one I have knitted the heel flap, so I've still to turn the heel on this one and then knit along the foot. It's a very simple little stitch pattern, but it's very effective and it looks really nice and it's very easy. It's very repetitive, so you don't really have to think about it too much as you're doing it. And I am knitting it on these needles here, which are Hiya Sharp Flyers, which is rather fun to say. These are 2.25s, just double checking. Is that right? Yeah, 2.25s. And I bought myself 2 sets because it had always been my intention to try and knit 2 at the same time. So this is my first time using these. Again, this is another experiment to see whether I can actually get into sock knitting in a bigger way than I was before. I like the idea of socks. I just don't really enjoy knitting them. I am a shawl knitter. I know that may come as a surprise, but I love knitting a shawl. It brings me a huge amount of pleasure. It feels like a large canvas that is mine to play with and to modify and adapt as I go, to introduce new colours, to explore new stitch patterns, new textures. Everything about knitting a shawl is delightful for me. And actually it feels very easy on my hands to knit a shawl with these long, I quite often use my Chaya Goo needles, which have got a stainless steel cable. You see them, they're the red lace ones. And they don't have any memory, these cables, and so they hold their shape. And I get quite long needles because, as you know, I like a big shawl and I tend to knit these very large pieces. But they don't feel very heavy because I tend to use lace weight yarn or fingering weight yarn. So they don't put a lot of pressure or strain on my hands, which is important because I knit a lot and I need to be able to look after my hands. So when I'm knitting these socks, I was really trying to get a way of holding them that felt supportive for my hands, that meant that it didn't feel like a chore and that it was easy going. So I started off using 4 of these needles, and I found it really pretty fiddly actually. I wasn't really making a lot of progress with it. And then I watched a couple of episodes by Very Pink Knits. She does wonderful tutorials. If you're interested in learning how to knit, or you want to level up your knitting, you want to learn some new techniques, then she is absolutely the place that I go every time, because she is just so clear and so straightforward in her descriptions, and the camera angle is so well done. It's so well lit. Just everything about them is very professional and very easy to follow. So she had a couple of different tutorials or videos about these types of needles, not necessarily these needles in particular, because I think there are a couple of different brands now of them. But when she was talking, I realised, and after talking to my mum as well, who also uses these needles, I realised that I was using these needles as I would use DPNs, because that's how I knit small circumferences. I either use small short cables for sleeves, but when I'm doing something like the gloves, which I knitted a couple of months back, or knitting socks, I use DPNs. So I was using these as DPNs, so I was using them as with 4, and it was really pretty fiddly. But watching that video, one of the videos, and speaking to my mum, I realised actually that the far better approach is to go about as though you were a magic looper, which I don't knit magic loop. I don't really enjoy it. So, but if you imagine that these are a replacement for magic loop rather than a replacement for DPNs, you get on a lot faster. So I took one of the needles out and knitted on 3 needles instead. So I had half of my stitches on one, half on the other, and used my 3rd needle to work my way around. And actually, once I started doing that, I got on much, much quicker, and I found it an easier process. That said, after turning the heel on this sock, so this is how much I had knitted, after turning the heel on this sock, I woke up the next morning, because I finished that off in the evening, woke up the next morning and I had a pain in my left wrist. Now that's quite unusual. You know, if I have had pain from knitting before, it will generally be in my right wrist in here, and then down the length of my forearm will start to feel a bit achy, and it will sometimes get a bit hot on the inside of my elbow, and that's when I know that I've done something to it, and it means that I need to stop altogether, which is very difficult because I don't stop knitting by choice. So it needs to be something like that that actually makes me put my needles down, and it always makes me a little bit apprehensive actually whenever I don't have my needles in my hands, so I don't quite know what to do with myself. But to get this pain in my right wrist was really quite unusual, and I wondered whether it was because I wasn't quite holding these new needles in the right way, because when I knit I like to have the needle in my left hand, and I like to rest my fingers against that needle so that I'm actually holding on to something. But with these needles, there's not really anything to hold on to. So I tend to find that this hand starts to slip round and my fingers start to pull round to the front, which I think has been putting strain down here and into my wrist. So I think I need to find a slightly different way to hold them. And of course, everybody holds their needles differently. Everybody knits slightly differently. And so we're activating different muscles, different joints when we knit. I throw, which is why the pain that I would normally get would come up in a right wrist. And when I say normally, I probably get that once every 2 years, if that. And so when it does show, it's a warning sign for me that I need to stop. I need to put my needles down. I ice it, and I need a bit of a break from knitting for a period of time. So when I got this pain, I knew that's what I needed to do. I needed to put my needles down, which I did very reluctantly. And then I iced. I've got an ice pack, which I put on my wrist, and I left it there and really rested it up over the next few days before I returned to my knitting. But when I returned, I thought, I don't actually want to return to this particular project right now because of this discomfort. And so I didn't want to start doing the same actions with that hand that might then aggravate the pain. There is another possibility for this pain because as my husband pointed out, we had actually swapped sides on the bed because he was getting a sore back. So we had swapped sides, and this pain in my really in my left side had shown up the following day. So it could have been because of the switch on the sides of the bed, or it could have been because of the needles. Either way, I wasn't taking any chances because, you know, it's so important to me to be able to use my hands to be able to knit, and I need to look after them, and so I take that very seriously. I think it's always very important to take any kind of pain that you're experiencing seriously. It's your talkative body. You know, your body is speaking to you. It's got some wisdom for you, and sometimes it's that you're overstretched, that you are doing too much, that you need to put things down, you need to rest. Or sometimes it means that you need to do something slightly different. You need to make some changes, and we need to listen to that too. So if you are suffering from any knitting pain, please know that you have my utmost sympathy, because it is not a fun thing. Please, please rest. And if it continues, then really do go and get it checked out, because it's so important. Our hands are so important to us makers and knitters and crocheters and sewers and all these kinds of things. So yeah, please do take good care of your tools. I will just say one last thing about these socks before I move on, which is about the yarn that I'm using. So I had a skein of this yarn, which I divided into 2 balls, which I rolled, 250-gram balls. And the yarn is yarn that I hand-dyed when I was on that 40th birthday trip that I mentioned We went to the far northwest of Scotland, the furthest you can really go on the mainland, and there's beautiful beaches there, like the like of which you've never seen in your life. Not the kind that you would necessarily wear a swimsuit to, unless it was a wetsuit, in which case to protect you from the cold. It's more the kind of beach that you wear an anorak to, or a very big cozy jacket, and certainly a shawl. But they're really beautiful beaches, and they are strewn with shells, like cowrie shells and mussel shells and oyster shells. And one other kind of shell that you sometimes see, in fact I've got a couple here, which I'll just grab for you, is these broken pieces of sea urchin. You see these? I've actually got a little jar of pieces that I've collected, stones and sea glass, and you can see quite a few pieces of these sea urchin there. So I love sea urchin pieces, I think. I love the colour of them. And they come in quite a wide variety of colour actually, but that's the most common, is this kind of pinky purpley colour. So that was really the colour I was trying to capture when we did some hand dyeing of our yarn that we had brought up with us. And we had a lot of fun doing it, and this is the yarn that I ended up with. This is I think it's Superwash BFL, so it feels really lovely, and it has this lovely memory attached too. So I will absolutely finish these socks. I think the name of the design as well is also what attracted me, Shell Cottage, because that also ties into the colourway. So I will finish these because they do have a very lovely memory attached, and I do think I just need to, I'm actually going to watch some more videos of people knitting with them to see exactly how they are holding the needle in their left hand, because I know that people are really enjoying these needles and are obviously making quick progress of the socks that they're knitting with them. So I think there's something I'm doing that is not quite right, and I just need to refine my technique with that in order to make sure that I don't hurt myself. So there we go. These are my Shell Cottage socks. So like I said, when I knew that I had this pain in my left wrist, I really didn't want to, like I say, push through the pain, because I think that's a very silly thing to do. We end up causing a lot more damage than moving through to our fullest healing. But after a few days, the pain had gone. And so I was testing it. Like I said, I didn't want to go back into doing the Hiya Flyer sock knitting. So I casted on something that I had been thinking of casting on for a long time, and it was next in my queue. And it is my Vertices Unite by Stephen West. And this is what I have. So I'm knitting it in my unspun yarn, which is the Undyed yarn, and it's huge. So this is this big striped section here, which I have done in between petals and salt, and a little bit, I don't know if you can see, oh there you can see a little bit of my footprints as well. And I'm knitting it single-strandedly. This is section 1. I'm knitting it single strand, held with a strand of mohair, which is from my stash. So I have a large stash of leftover mohairs or random balls of mohair. So I'm using those along with my Undyed. So that's section 1 is complete, and I finished section 2 last night, which is this section here, for which I used this dark sort of purpley colour. It's actually got like little flecks of orange and gold through it. It's such a pretty colour, and I think that's called Calendula Lavandula. I think I'd been calling it Lavandula Calendula, but I think it's actually Calendula Lavandula, and the salt. And as you can see, this first piece here, this first section up to here, I was holding it with a piece of, maybe I can show you on the back. Ah yes, I can, because there's my ends. So that first bit there was knitted with like this greyish purple shade, not that dissimilar from the one that I'm wearing right now actually. And then I ran out of that, and so I had a bit of leftover white mohair which has speckles in it, and it's from Skein Queen, and I think it's called Snow Tracks, and I bought it at EYF, Edinburgh Yarn Festival, possibly, gosh, 4 years ago maybe. But yes, you can just see some of the, there you go, there's some of the speckles that you can see there in the white. So I switched to that, and I have to say that Undyed yarn is truly magical, because I was looking at it going, I am so nearly running out of this Calendula Lavandula. I don't think I'm going to make it. And then I read onto the pattern and realised that I had to knit in that Calendula Lavandula shade like the full length of section 2, closing all of my short row gaps, and then knit all the way back again. And I'm looking at my yarn and I'm thinking, there's no way. But I thought, oh, I'll just give it a go and see what happens. And I was so surprised. Let's see if I can find how much I've got left. I still had some left, not very much left. There we go. There you can kind of see the unspun. That's what I mean by unspun. It doesn't have like a ply to it, and it's very fragile. It's more like roving in that sense, but it's very soft. It's, I suppose, similar in composition to something like Plotolopi, but it's very soft. I find it much softer than the Plotolopi. This is some more of my leftovers that I have. I'll just show you here. So I think this is Magnolia, this little bit of dark magenta, and then these were, this and this, were part of a bag that I bought, because I'm a Patreon, that was available to me, and so it's got salt in the middle, and this is my footprints, and then this is Goodbye Summer, and I have very little of the Goodbye Summer left, but I've got some of that left, and this is my Between Petals, and this is all I've got left of that as well. So my stash of Undyed yarn is now greatly diminished, but I think I will have enough, because certainly if that's taught me anything about the yarn chicken experience, that it little does actually go a long way. So I'm going to be starting section 3, which goes in here, and so I start picking up stitches, selvage stitches on either side to create a rectangle on the bias. It's a modular knit by Stephen West, which means that it's knit in pieces, and you pick up stitches, and I'll just show you that again on this wrong side here. You pick up stitches along your selvage edge to then start knitting the next piece onto it, and in that way your project grows, and you can start doing really interesting things with colour, with texture. So you can see there. So I'm really pleased with how this is knitting up, and because it's single strand of the Undyed and a single strand of mohair, it's actually incredibly light, and it's very warm, and it's very soft. So it's not, it didn't put any pressure or any tension onto my hands or onto my wrists, and so it was the perfect thing to work on at that particular point in time. I'll just show you some of my mohair that I'm using. So I held this with the Between Petals for section 1, and I held this with my salt and my footprints, which is a gradient mohair, which is beautiful, really lovely. I have some of this, which is from my advent, my yarn advent that my mum made me this year. We've done that the last couple of years, and this is in one of my packages. So I'm going to hold that with some salt, I think, for one of the sections. But I'm having a lot of fun with that. I always find Stephen West patterns very invitational for us to really explore our creativity, explore our relationship to colour, and to really enjoy the process of knitting it. My best advice, I think, for starting something like a Vertices Unite, or perhaps for starting like a Marled Magic, any of these kind of modular knits where you are bringing in lots of different colours and textures, is to go through your stash, pull out your leftovers, pull out some full skeins, start to see what colours are working well with one another, and then I tend to put them all into a big basket or a big bag, and I leave it beside my seat where I normally do my knitting. And then when it's time to introduce a new colour or a new texture, some new mohair, or perhaps a bit of suri or whatever it is, then I'll just go into the bag and I'll have a wee rummage through and see what it is that I want to knit with next. And for me, that works a lot better than planning it all out from the very beginning. I found that if I start to try and plan and plot it out too much, then I tend to get very creatively blocked. I get a bit stuck. Instead, I find that diving in and exploring it as I go works much, much better for me. So maybe that'll work better for you too. So that is everything that I am working on right now, but I wanted to share with you some of the things that were calling me into life. So some of that is actually my dream knitting. So I wanted to share some dream knitting with you. I really, really want to knit the Corella shawl by Julie Dubrow. Julie, who I think she's on Ravelry as Julie Knits in Paris. She brought out a ballet collection, and I think there's like the ballerina poncho, and I think there's a hat, and there's the point shawl, and now she's brought out the Corella wrap. Now, I knitted the point shawl. Gosh, I'm showing lots of shawls this time round, but I knitted the point shawl last 2019, because I wore it to Edinburgh Yarn Festival 2019. And it's brioche. So the first section is a large asymmetric triangle. So the first section is basically created with slip stitches with yarn overs on either side, and to create this beautiful swathe of fabric. And I've used this lovely grey mohair and this mohair silk, and in between is it's a single ply lace weight from the Walk collection in their delicate merino, and it's called Bohemia, I think. I think so. And then it moves into this section here, which is brioche. I think these look like those, I don't know what they're called, but they look like little orange lanterns, a type of plant that you see, and they're really pretty. I always think of that as that kind of shape, or persimmons, or there's something quite organic about it. And I love the speckles in this particular yarn, and just the repeating pattern was so enjoyable to do, and it really helped me to master the brioche stitches for your large increases, and then for your right leaning and left leaning decreases, and then the center decrease here. So it was really it was a lovely knit, actually. I so enjoyed it. And I still think this is an incredibly beautiful shawl. It's because of the shape of it, you have to wear it, I think, in a slightly different way. So I tend to wrap the longer side round my neck like that, and then this can come up and over my shoulder like this. So you really get the full effect of you see that? Isn't it beautiful? So when I saw the Corella, I saw that Julie had used the same stitch pattern, and that it was also using the mohair too to create this very kind of ethereal light fabric. So I just really want to knit it. So I have a few options in my stash, and I will knit this from stash. I'm going to have to take this off though because it's incredibly warm despite the fact that it's so light, and it is very light. Look, you can see right through it. But what I'm looking at just now, she says that you need 400 meters of fingering weight in 2 different colours and a mohair, a silk mohair that is a good match for one of the colours. So I have some beautiful Ching fibre high twist BFL in Snapper, which is a really beautiful shade of peach, and gingerbread, which looks like gingerbread. But I was looking at the meterage on them, and they say they're 365 meters, and it said you really need the 400 meters to make sure you don't run out. So then I went back into my stash and I discovered that I've got these. So these are actually very similar to the 2 colours of the Ching fibre that I have. This one is called, gosh, what's this colour? Apricot. And it is just like an apricot, so I shouldn't really have had to have looked. And this one here is called Cognac. So, and if you've been watching this for a while, you'll know that my parents live in Cognac, so that was a very appropriate colour. And both of these came in my advent calendar this year. And this is the yarn that I was thinking of. This is the mohair that I was thinking of matching with it. Again, it is Drops Kid Silk. I've mentioned Drops a lot this episode. But the reason for that is that, like I said, I do knit a lot. And it is a very affordable yarn, and it is natural fibres. And those are, you know, I prefer to knit with natural fibres. They have quite a good colour range as well, and I can get them relatively easily. I can buy them online and they are sent within the UK, which, following the upsets of Brexit, has become an increasingly important consideration to make, unfortunately. So this is what I'm thinking of for the Corella wrap. So I think that could be really, really beautiful. This is Malabrigo lace, so it's not 4-ply, it's not fingering weight, but I think because it is single ply that it will actually work okay. The point shawl, this one here, it was also supposed to have been knitted in fingering weight, and I've knitted it in, I think it's 600 meters to 100 grams, which makes it kind of like a heavy lace, somewhere between a lace and a fingering weight. But it is lighter than what was specified in the pattern. So I think because of that, and because you're holding it with the fluffy yarn, that I think it would still work. So that's a consideration. So I may still change my mind, but I know that I'm not going to change my mind about the pattern, because I'm imagining myself wearing that shawl as our winter gives way to spring, and it just feels so light and lovely and so pretty. So I'm really excited about that. Another shawl that I'm excited about knitting, because can one have too many shawls? I don't think so. I don't think so. And if one can, then one will give them away. So I'm interested in knitting the Cloud Break shawl by Melanie Berg. And again from EYF, but again EYF 2019, I bought some beautiful yarn from the Knitting Goddess. And I bought a skein of, oh dear, it's all mashed up. It's a skein of BFL and Massam, 75% BFL, 25% Massam. It's 100 grams and it's 400 meters, and it's undyed. And to go along with that, I bought this. Isn't that completely glorious? It's a set of rainbow mini skeins. There's 12 of them here. It's, let me see, 120 grams altogether. So there's 480 meters here, which I'm going to pair up with this. But then I didn't have quite enough for the Cloud Break shawl. And so I went to my friend Jess from Ginger Twist Studio, which is a lovely little yarn shop in Edinburgh. And I got her Massam Mayhem blend, which again is 75% Blue Face Leicester 25% Massam, and it is 400 meters. So it's the same base, but they are it's not really picking up. They're ever so slightly different, even although they're the same blend and they are the same, and they're both undyed. But I think in the context of the shawl, I don't think I don't think anybody would notice, and I think I can blend one quite easily into the other. So the yarn for this shawl is a little bit more definite, but it's not all shawls that I've got my eye on. I also want to knit a jumper. I want to knit a sweater. If you are not from the UK, and a jumper for you means, I think it means like a jumpsuit or like a pinafore, what we would call a pinafore. Anyway, or dungarees. Maybe it's dungarees. I don't know. But for us, a jumper is this. So I'm going to be knitting Hana, I think, by Junko Okamoto. It's such an interesting construction. My mum has knitted one. In fact, when I first saw the pattern for Hana, I was not convinced. I really wasn't very sure. But my mum knitted one, and it is so beautiful. And every time I see her wearing it, I think, I have to knit this jumper. Again, it is a modular knit in that it is knit in pieces, and then it is sewn together using, I think it's a mixture of mattress stitch and blanket stitch. So some of the embroidery is visible on the outside. And it uses a worsted weight. Now, my yarn collection mostly consists of lace weight and 4-ply. I have a little bit of DK, and I have a little bit of iron weight and chunky, but really not very much. It's not really, like I said, I don't really like the weight of that yarn on my hands. I much prefer the lighter weight. But I figured that if I held a lace weight with a 4-ply, with a fingering weight, then I would get close to worsted. So I need to knit a swatch for this to see, but I'll show you the yarn that I'm thinking of holding double. I might have shown you this before in the context of a different sweater, because I was thinking that I wanted to knit Stephen West's light festival sweater with this, but I think I've changed my mind and I'm going to knit the Hana with it instead. My mum and dad gave me this beautiful yarn on my 40th birthday, so I opened it up again at this little house on the northwest coast, so that's obviously a theme for today's episode. But this is called Mountain Heather, and it's by Skein Queen. It's in her cracking base, which is 100% Corriedale. It's 4-ply fingering, non-superwash, 400 meters for 100 grams. And I have 4 skeins of this. So I have a proper sweater quantity. Look at this. Isn't that just completely stunning? It's so special, this yarn, that I mostly do dream knitting with it. I sit with it and I come up with plans for it, and then I never actually cast it on. But I think possibly the Hana for this. The yarn that I want to hold with it is this Alpaca boucle from Hedgehog Fibres. And it's in the colourway Cinder, so you can see it. There's amazing yardage for this. So it's 620 meters for 100 grams. And I'll see if I can just fish out a little bit of it so you can see the strands. There you go. So it's boucle, so it's got a little bit of fluff to it. Oh, it's got a lot of fluff to it. Look at this. Isn't that gorgeous? These little loops of fibre. So the plan is to knit these two together. And because this is boucle and not even mohair, I think it will create an even fluffier, even thicker, not necessarily thicker, fuller fabric than perhaps mohair would have done, and may look okay as a replacement for worsted weight. But like I said, I'm going to have to knit that up as a swatch and see, because as I said, this yarn is special yarn to me, and I don't want to spoil it or use it on something that I'm then unhappy with. So I want this. I realise as I'm speaking this that I am putting way too much pressure on this knit to be perfect, and there's no knit that is perfect, not in my experience anyway. I will just say one more thing about this yarn here. I actually bought this. This is also special yarn for me. I've got 3 skeins of this, and I bought it at Stephen and Penelope in Amsterdam, and that was actually our last trip abroad before all of the lockdowns and the quarantines and all of that kind of thing started. So we went to The Hague in October 2019 for my husband's work, and I said, well, if we're flying into Amsterdam, we need to go to Stephen and Penelope. So fortunately, Stephen and Penelope's has a boyfriend or husband bench, and so he sat there and met an architect from Denmark, and the pair of them properly hit it off and had a great time. And me and the architect's wife took our time and wandered around and chose various different yarns and put them back again and chose different yarns. But this is the one I ended up with. I got 3 skeins of this. So it's super soft and very lovely, and I think it will be a beautiful complement to the Corriedale. So, the Hannah. So that's my dream knitting at the moment. That's what I'm thinking about. But what is actually calling me into life, I think, well, one of the things has been good mail. Do you know, like a happy mail day? I love a happy mail day, and I had a wonderful happy mail day a couple of weeks ago when I got these in the post. As I did say, my mum has been knitting socks. Well, she knitted me a pair of socks. Aren't they fabulous? Which has been, honestly, it's been so cold here. We had a real cold snap. Normally in Scotland, our weather will come from the southwest, so it comes off the Atlantic. And that is, of course, where we have the Gulf Stream. So our weather is actually pretty temperate, and we don't tend to get very, very low temperatures. However, every now and again, the jet stream will shift, or the low pressure will get pushed out by high pressure coming in from the north and the northeast. And when that happens, our temperatures fall away, and that's when we get our snow and we get our ice. So we had a big weather system come from the northeast, and it was very, very cold. And then this package arrived, and it had these incredibly cozy knitted socks that my mum, there is something incredibly sweet, I think, when somebody knits something for you. It's like I wish you warm feet. So these are, the pattern is Altitude by Helen Stewart, and the yarn is tuku wool. And I can't remember what the colourways are. Unfortunately, I should have checked that before I came on. But what I can tell you is that I know that my mum knitted a pair of socks for my dad in this lovely hazelnut colour, and so she's included that as the stripe in mine. So I kind of I love knowing that as well, that there's a little bit there of my dad's socks in my socks. So they're really, really warm, and they're really cozy, and they've been so appreciated because it has been really cold and my feet have been really cold. So that was lovely. But that was not all that was in the package, because this was a very good mail day. She has also given me 4 skeins of this. This is In the Mood, Kremke Sole Wool, and it is mulesing free extra fine merino, and it's 125 meters for 50 grams, and I've got 4 skeins of this, and this is the colorway Cheerfulness. Isn't that lovely? Let's take it off so you can see the full skein. But look at some of those colors. Aren't they beautiful? So I was thinking, because this is a DK weight, that I might knit myself a Spark cardigan by Andrea Mowry, which is a beautiful belted cardigan design with a bit of a shawl collar and colour work throughout. The issue with of doing colour work with yarn like this is that your instinct is to choose one of these colours as your main colour. But if you do that, then of course there's no contrast when you come up to that part of the colour work. So actually you need to choose a different colour altogether, one that's not included, preferably in this many colours, and that's quite a tricky thing to do when there is many colours in this as there is. However, I was thinking about the possibility of either yarn that's kind of, I suppose, this kind of colour, sort of an oatmeal like this, or going dark and choosing something like a very deep maroon wine colour, so that it really pops with the greens and the blues and the oranges. So I haven't quite decided on that, but I will need to make a DK yarn purchase for the main colour if I'm going to be doing that. But I think that would be incredibly lovely. So, like I said, that was a good mail day. So that was it. That made me come to life. The other good mail day that I had was when I ordered some Holst Super Soft from Holst Garn over in Denmark. And when I had ordered from them in January, or no, it was December actually, they got back in touch and cancelled my order and said that because of Brexit, they weren't able to deliver to the UK right now, which I completely understand. I mean, Brexit has caused so much difficulty for so many companies, both in the UK and in the rest of Europe. And it has certainly been the exact opposite of the frictionless trade that was promised, which, like so many Brexit promises, it was not worth the paper it was written on. But I was very disappointed because I love Holst Super Soft. I think it's an amazing yarn. It comes in so many colours. If you've not knitted with it before, then it's, when it arrives, it doesn't feel super soft. It feels a bit crisp and a bit dry, and that's actually because it's still got its spinning oil in it. So actually when you wash it, it's really when it starts to bloom. And I wouldn't say it ever gets to the point of like Merino Super Soft, but it's a more rustic yarn than that, but it is soft and it does feel lovely, and it certainly doesn't irritate my skin. I use it for shawls, so you know, having it around the back of my neck and my throat does not feel itchy to me at all. So I was quite disappointed when I put that order in and it had been cancelled. However, I went back onto the website and had a little look, I think probably towards the end of January, and I realised that they had some cones of their Super Soft in the sale bin. And so I thought, well, I'll just try and experiment then. I'll put an order in through again and see what happens, and also see if I end up having to pay money for customs. And my cone arrived. I didn't have to pay customs for it, but then it was, I think, including shipping, I think this was £23. So I think it was £17 something, £17.90 maybe. And I got charged about £5 for shipping, which I think is a bit more than I was being charged before, but I could be wrong. I haven't double checked that. But I didn't have to pay customs on it, and it arrived promptly and there was no issues with it. So it looks like I can order Holst Super Soft again from Denmark, and that they've managed to navigate their way through the minefield that is trading with the UK right now. So yay. I did also have a bit more yarn arrive in the post. I think it's because, you know, obviously we're not going out anywhere. Scotland is very, very locked down right now. We're not leaving the house, the flat, very much at all, other than to walk to the local supermarket and to pick up some ingredients and come home again. That's about the length and breadth of our, I think like the furthest I've gone recently is the post office, which is a little bit further walk, but not that far. So really we're not moving very far at all. We're not meeting up with friends or family. there's no cafes or restaurants open. Everything is closed. Everything is locked down. And there is some talk now of things starting to open back up. The little ones, our youngest kids in our society are going back to school, I think on Monday. And some of the older ones, the older students going back, they've got practical assessments. But other than that, the schools are going to remain closed. Everybody's still working from home. So what's a girl to do other than just stay at home and browse yarn online and occasionally buy some? So my daughter wanted to buy some yarn from Wool Warehouse. And if you buy yarn over £25 from Wool Warehouse, then you get free shipping. So her order was not going to come to £25, so she asked me if I would like to put in an order with her in order to get the free shipping. I honestly can't resist free shipping, so or yarn. So so I bought some, and this is what I got. This is the Drops Brushed Alpaca, the same kind that I used in this, and in fact it's the same colour. It's this pink sand here, because I really, really like this colour. I actually have a beautiful raincoat that I bought for myself last year in that colour. So I bought a sweater quantity of this brushed alpaca. Now it actually says that it's Aran weight, but as you can see, it's not. I suppose if you knit it up on large needles because of the fluff factor, then it might appear as Aran weight, but I've certainly never knitted it as Aran weight before. I am looking at a pattern which I cannot remember the name of now, but it uses 3 strands of mohair. So I figured instead of using 3 strands of mohair, I'll just use 1 strand of the Drops Brushed Alpaca. So that's what I'm thinking of for that. But I'm not showing you the pattern for that just yet because I'm really not sure about what I'm going to do with it yet. But I have plenty of it, so that's exciting. What else? Oh, I've got another 2 purchases which are not yarn related. So the first thing I got was the Animal Spirit deck from the Wild Unknown by Kim Kranz. I've had my eye on this for a long time. I do love, as you know, I do love an oracle deck. So we have the guidebook here, which is beautiful. It's really well illustrated and written. The only thing I would say about it is that it's laid out in quite a strange way, in that it's not laid out alphabetically. It's laid out according to elements, with different animals ascribed to different elements, and then even within those elements they're not then categorized alphabetically. So when you're trying to find an animal in the guidebook, it's a little bit convoluted, would be my criticism. That said, these is a very minor one because these are just completely beautiful. Look at these. Are they not gorgeous? Oh, look. Drew the swan. Of course. Let me see. Oh, there's the wolf. Aren't these just beautiful cards? And then they've got some animals which are slightly more mystical, mythical creatures. So they're not all... Oh, there's the whale. I'll find one more for you. What do we have? Oh, the oyster. So they're just beautiful. I've been looking at this deck for a long time. I love Kim Kranz's work. She has a wonderful Instagram page account, which I highly recommend you go and check out. She also has the Wild Unknown Tarot deck, which is the tarot deck that I use on a daily basis with my work. And she's also brought out the Archetypes deck, which is a lovely circular deck. I think I've drawn from that before for you on this podcast. It's exceptionally lovely too, and I really enjoy working with that one also. So this was really, I was really just completing the set. So there we go. That's the animal spirit deck. And the last thing that I bought, my phone went out of contract. So that meant I could upgrade. So I got this one here, which is the iPhone SE 2020, and it's got 256 gigabytes of memory, which is wonderful because my last phone had 32 and I could not record anything on it. I couldn't take any photographs with it because the whole thing was so full that it wouldn't take anything else. But with this one, and the reason why I'm telling you about it, is that I can now record videos on it. So it means that, because my setup at the moment is that I'm recording this on my iPad. But being able to record on my phone means that it's a little bit more portable. Now, right now, as I said, we're all in lockdown, so this is not terribly relevant for right now. But my plan is, as we move through this year and as things start to open up a little bit more and the city starts to come back to life, then I would like to show you around Edinburgh. I would like to take you to some of my favourite places. I would like to sit and knit with you, maybe in a cafe or maybe outside in the meadows, or maybe we go visit Arthur's Seat or Blackford Hill, or I'll take you out to see the duck pond or visit the swans, or there's lots of beautiful things to do and see, and I would love to show you some of that. And I think this year our travel restrictions are very tight right now, and I think they're just going to tighten as we go on. So there are quarantines being set up for anybody coming into Scotland. And so I'm thinking that if you have a real love of Scotland and of Edinburgh, then maybe I can share a little bit of it with you through my podcast if you're not able to come and visit us over here. So there you go. That's why I'm sharing my new phone with you, is because I want to start doing some videos on the go once things start to open up a little bit from lockdown. So there we go. Something to look forward to. Another thing that's bringing me to life is my Patreon. I am so enjoying my Patreon. I set it up almost a year ago. I set it up on the spring equinox in 2020, on the 20th of March. And it's been going for almost a year, and it's growing in such a beautiful way. It's got a really lovely community that's developing there. I am sharing posts about the phases of the moon, about astrology, about tarot, about goddess archetypes. We are doing a reading group there right now on Kissing the Hag by Emma Restel-Orr, which I read a little bit for you at the end of the last episode. And it's just developing really beautifully. So if you would like to explore that, and if you would like to come and join us there, then I will leave the link for that again in the description box, and you can go and check it out. What else? So we've been watching a few things on TV. Hasn't everybody? We watched The Dig, which is a movie that's come out on Netflix with Ralph Fiennes and Carey Mulligan. Is that right? Carey Mulligan? I think so. And it was brilliant. I highly recommend it. It was so beautiful. The cinematography is epic. You've got these very large skies and big expanses of field, but then when the people move into shot, there's a real sort of intimacy and connection with the character at the same time as keeping these very epic skies. And the contrast of that is really very stunning, and I think really calls us to the theme of the movie, which is about the personal relationships we have within historical past and of future history as well, future historical events. It's set on the cusp of World War II, and there's this woman, Edith Pretty, who owns this land, and it has these large sort of grassy mounds, and she's very intrigued by them, and she wants to have them excavated. So she finds herself an excavator, and he comes and starts to do an archaeological dig, and they start to uncover the past underneath these mounds. And it's an incredibly beautiful movie. I really loved it. It made me cry. but then most things do, so that's fine. But I think you might really enjoy that too, so you might want to check that out. We've also been watching Death in Paradise, which is a long running programme on the BBC, which is set in the Caribbean island of, oh gosh, name's San Marie. There you go. And it's the kind of show where there's a murder that happens at the beginning, and the rest of it's about trying to figure out who done it. And you generally have maybe about 4 or 5 different suspects, and it starts to unravel as you go on. It's an hour long. It's very gentle actually, for the fact that it's a program about where a murder happens at the start of every episode. It's actually a relatively gentle program. It's been running for, I think it's maybe 10 seasons. Each season has about 8 episodes, and it's on BBC iPlayer, but it's also on Netflix, I think, now too. So I just really enjoy it, and it's a bit of sunshine and community and connection and intrigue, and it just ticks a lot of boxes for me, so I really enjoy that. So you might enjoy that too if you're looking for something a bit gentle. We're also watching WandaVision, which I wasn't all that geared up to see really, but actually I find that I'm really enjoying it, almost despite myself. I am not a superhero movie fan, I have to say. I have seen a lot of them because obviously I have 3 kids who just adore all of that thing, and it was a family movie kind of thing that we would do. The new blockbusters come out, so we would all go to the cinema together, and it was a lovely way for us to connect and spend time with one another, and I enjoyed that more than I enjoyed the movie. So I've seen things like Avengers and all these kinds of things, but I can't really tell you very much about them, and I get lots of things wrong, so I'm not even going to attempt to tell you anything about any of that. But WandaVision is on Disney Plus, and we are really enjoying it because it's very different. You've got these 2 characters who are from the Marvel universe. My kids will be impressed. who find themselves in like an old 50s sitcom, and it plays through almost exactly like an old 50s sitcom. It's quite disorientating, and then but there's certain things that are slightly off, and then in the next episode they're in like a 1960s sitcom and things are slightly more off, and then things start to break down, and you start to realise that there's something else going on other than this set piece that you're watching on the television. Is very, very clever and very meta. The acting is also very good, and I am actually really enjoying it. So we haven't watched all of the episodes that have come out, but we've watched most of them. I think we've got 2 that are still to be watched. But yeah, I'm glad that I'm glad I gave in and watched it because I am enjoying it. Something else that I think is really beautiful that you might enjoy watching is actually on YouTube, and it's Christian Dior's Haute Couture Spring Summer 2021 collection. The movies that they are doing for these collections right now are just beyond. It's like I watched it and I thought, how lucky am I to be living at this point in time when fashion houses are able to create this kind of media to accompany their collections, because breathtaking, honestly. So Christian Dior's is now headed up by Maria Grazia Curie, and she has a real fascination for tarot. And as you know, I have a fascination for that also. So the little movie that is accompanying this collection, it's about 15 minutes long. I'll link to it in the description box so that you can see it too. But the costumes are in the movie, that they are part of the collection, and the little story that they have woven through it is this woman who is encountering all of these different tarot archetypes, and they're dressed in just these most exquisite pieces. And the set is this Italian castle. I think my mum looked into it and found it was just outside, possibly Florence. Sorry if I got that wrong. But I think it's maybe just outside Florence. But just so lovely. And then after you've seen that, there are other videos which talk a little bit more about the tarot influence and inspiration. And then there's other videos about the savoir-faire. So, you know, how do they do the embroidery and all of that, which is just so beautiful. And there's a little bit about the making of the film as well. But just attention to detail and the craftsmanship and the vision is just so creative and so inspiring. And if you do enjoy that, then go back and watch the movie that they brought out for the autumn-winter 2020, because it was different again, but just exquisite. It was kind of mythical creatures in a wood. And they bring this lovely cabinet towards these mythical women. And they open the cupboard doors, and inside are all these tiny little dresses that are exact replicas of that season's dresses. And then they pick one, and then you see them going and making it up and then bringing it back, and then you see these incredible creatures in these beautiful dresses. I'm really not describing it in any way that gives it justice, but oh, exquisite. So that's something to watch. And if you like all of that, then you must also check out on YouTube the Victoria and Albert Museum, because they have so many videos about fashion and about craftsmanship, about design. There's just so much to dive into and explore. I think they had Edith Scapiarelli, the designer? They had a whole piece on her and on her designs, which I really loved watching too. So I'll link to all of those in the description box. There's also Secrets at the Museum, which was a BBC series. I think there's maybe 4 episodes currently available on BBC iPlayer, but I know that you can also find the full episodes on YouTube too. So that they were really, really excellent. I watched them last year and loved every single minute of them. Wow, okay, so I've done a lot of talking. I'm going to have another sip of my water. This is the problem with leaving it too long between episodes on the podcast. There's just too much to talk about and too much to share with you. But I will just share one more thing just before I go. And it's a poem, and it's from this book here, She Will Soar, which is a collection of poems which have been brought together by the editor Ana Sampson. And they are bright, brave poems of freedom by women. And I wanted to find a poem that I felt really held the essence of coming to life, particularly at this particular point in time. Astrologically speaking, the sun has just moved into the sign of Pisces. And Pisces is a mutable sign. It means that change is happening. We're entering into an experience of fluidity and of flow and of evolution. There's adaptation occurring now. And so we're in that kind of watery, oceanic realm right before we enter into the next sign, which of course will be Aries, where we start to see the green shoots and things, where change really starts to get established. But right now it's just, we're starting to feel changes upon us. This is called Lines Composed in a Wood on a Windy Day, and it's by Anne Brontë. My soul is awakened, my spirit is soaring, and carried aloft on the wings of the breeze. For above and around me the wild wind is roaring, arousing to rapture the earth and the seas. The long withered grass in the sunshine is glancing, the bare trees are tossing their branches on high, the dead leaves beneath them are merrily dancing, the white clouds are scudding across the blue sky. I wish I could see how the ocean is lashing, the foam of its billows to whirlwinds of spray. I wish I could see how its proud waves are dashing, and hear the wild roar of their thunder today. So my loves, I will leave it there. I will release you into your days, into your evenings, into your weekends, and I will just say that I wish that you feel this call, this coming into life, this frisson of change that's moving through the air right now, and that joy is beckoning us into the future. So my loves, till next time.